All
Perfect.
right. We're there, finally, hooray, just at the nick of time. So I have total butterflies after hearing such powerful talks earlier today. Um, I'm really happy to be here. And I want to say that I love working in robotics, and I find it challenging and it's ever evolving, and there's a ton of room for me to learn and grow. And I get to work with and meet some really brilliant people. And I have access to really cool toys. And best of all, I'm working on technologies that will have a real impact on dramatically improving the quality of life for both individuals and society. So here is me with my team. I'm there on the right, and we've just successfully completed like a really extensive data collection project. And so we're cheersing each other with our ridiculous mugs in the lab at TRI. And here's one of me at my previous role with J-Bridge Robotics. I am changing some cabling that got filled with water on a GPS on top of this terrifying combine for an automated farming vehicles project we did. Oh, and I went too far. But spoilers. Here we go. And this is look ma no hands of me and the tractor. Anyway, I want to provide a trigger warning that there will be some brief conversation about the sexualization of robots and women, and to acknowledge that this talk is focused only on gender, and there are other kinds of diversity, especially as the previous speaker just went over, and intersecting parts of our identities that are deserving a similar conversation, but I don't have time to cover that in the time that I have for this talk. I'll focus on just feminine gender in robotics. So with the further caveat that I am not a human robotics interaction specialist, nor do I work on humanoid or gendered robots, I'm going to talk about expressing feminine gender in robotics and the value of women in the field of robotics and why we need more women in robotics. So research has shown that women have a greater tendency to exhibit other-oriented rather than self-oriented behavior. And in a study at the Boston Museum of Science, feminine voiced robots were seen as more trustworthy. Women's voices are seen to be helpful and supportive and trustworthy in research. So it's no wonder that so many popular robotic assistants speak in feminine voices. And then there are robots with feminine bodies. So I was really excited to learn about NASA's feminine-bodied robot Valkyrie. And now I can advance my slide. Haha. Even as the person who was showing her to me awkwardly referred to her diaper, which had been removed to access her wiring. So as robots go, she is advanced, powerful, and capable, and her hips and female first responder and armor-inspired chest plate give her a distinctively feminine form. And her lead engineer for the Valkyrie robot is quoted in the article, "Why are too few females in robotics? Could it be the robots?" In Robotics Business Review said, "There's just no reason that we can't have robots that don't have more of the appearance of our workforce. There's no reason that we don't have robots that are inspired by the male form and robots that are inspired by the female form." So hear, hear. But if you look at YouTube videos of Valkyrie, as I have, you can see that people question the value of giving a robot like this a more feminine form. They make rude sexualized comments like, "but can it sex?" and "nice thigh gap, girl." People don't question why Boston Dynamics Atlas or Honda's Asimo have a masculine shape, because most people expect robots to be male and feminine robots to be built for a male audience. But there is nothing inherently more practical about the male form than the feminine form for a robot humanoid. And as a woman, I appreciate that my form has its advantages too. So are we creating a feedback loop? Robotic personas reflect the culture of their makers. The choice to make a robot designed for certain functions speak with a feminine or masculine voice, or to be shaped more like a human man or woman body reflects our cultural expectations for the roles of women and men. The creators of gendered machines will inevitably bake in their cultural gender biases or the perceived gender biases of their intended market. And just as art reflects life, so art influences life with the potential to enforce and perpetuate these biases. The more ubiquitous gendered robots become, the greater the influence they will have on our expectations for what it means to express a gender. And if we want our daughters and sisters to grow up to be empowered contributors to society, we have to show them strong examples of feminine role models. I had a mentee who told me that the show, My Life as a Teenage Robot, had inspired her to pursue robotics. It was a cool female robot character that she could relate to. And personally, I found inspiration in the spaceship mechanic, Kaylee from the show Firefly. I also had the benefit of growing up in an environment that treated math and science as if they were for everyone, not just boys, even as I often heard that as a girl who was good at math, I was an exception, which made me call into question whether liking math and being good at math was consistent with my femininity. And I wonder if I would have gone further with my math education if that had been different. We need positive examples of feminine, masculine, non-binary, and non-gendered robots in art, as well as giving exposure and recognition to the diverse range of robots and contributors to robotics in reality, to inspire a more diverse group of future roboticists to join the field in order to ensure that we create robots that serve and reflect everyone. And the more open our minds are to the possibilities for the form of robots, the more innovative we can be as we create them. And another quote from Slate from an article that says, robot gender, is it bad for human women? The creators of robots then have both a fantastic opportunity and a very real responsibility to consider what gender means as they design the machines that are becoming increasingly present in our hospitals, our schools, our homes, and our public spaces at large. Some researchers suggest gender stereotypes could be beneficial for robot interfacing by, for example, capitalizing on our tendency to be more comfortable with women as caretakers. More feminine home healthcare robots could put patients at ease, but that might be a dangerous path, one that is antithetic to the decades of ongoing work to bring women into fields like business, politics, and particularly science and technology. If robots with a feminine appearance are built only when someone wants a sex bot or an in-home maid, leaving masculine robots with all the heavy lifting, what does that say to the flesh and blood humans who work with them? We need more women working in robotics. I have seen numbers ranging from 8 to 32% for women technical contributors in robotics professions. And as someone who's been the only woman in a meeting with 39 people, or one of 2 women on a team of 16, that range seems pretty accurate to me. But women make up 47% of the workforce. And when you look at the number of women at entry level versus managers or C-levels in robotics, it's even worse. Which reminds me of some good news. I'm excited that my company, as of a couple of days ago, now has a woman president, and that my team manager is a woman, and that the other team I work most closely with, technical program manager, is also a woman. So the tides may be changing, at least around me, thanks in part, I'm sure, to my company's concerted DEI efforts, including sponsoring this event. And this means that my company proactively supports the inclusion of a more diverse workforce. It is in the interest of companies to hear the input of women at every step of the design process, since we comprise half the population. Needing to recover from a snafu like Alexa or Siri responding to sexual harassment by saying thank you or a polite witticism harms brands. Having to recover from not being able to recognize women's voices or faces because your training set was inadequate because your product reflects its designers and its designers are all men is more difficult and costly than building inclusion directly into your pipeline. But hiring women isn't enough. Representation doesn't matter without inclusion. If you have women on your staff, but you don't listen or you don't have creative input from women, you're not going to benefit from their perspectives. At TRI, we promote allyship and we educate our leadership on how to be inclusive. And this is important because when you have a history of working with mostly men and you went to school where most of your professors and peers were men, you may not know how to be a good ally to women without further education. And that goes for women immersed in that environment as well. So when I asked the question in our Women and Allies ERG meeting, What qualities of being a woman help you excel in tech? And if you're ally, what qualities of the women you work with make you value them? And what do women bring to the table in tech that's important to the field? We found it difficult actually to suss out like what is actually something that's a trait of our gender, since it's something that we carry with us all the time. But many, But many women in my company said that they like to get to know the people that they work with and how their work fits together so they can know who to ask questions to. And excuse me, my monitors are confusing me. And connect with people and connect people with each other when someone needs to know something. And one woman said that she thought that this was not a common trait of the engineers she's worked with, and I could relate. So men who came to the meeting as allies said that they valued getting the perspectives of people who don't have the same background and experiences that they do, and that can help them get unstuck and think about new ways of solving problems. So this also reminded me of a story, and I wasn't sure about sharing it, but people have gotten pretty personal, so I think that I will go ahead and tell you that I attended a robotics competition to provide hardware support to some competing teams. And one of the tasks the robots were judged on was identifying people by age and gender. And one of the judges asked a woman professor who had traveled with one of the teams to stand in a group of volunteers for the robots to assess. She only later discovered that she had been asked in order to give the robots an elderly woman to identify, and she might have been 45 or maybe 50 based on my human perception, and only someone in their 20s would have the audacity to consider that elderly. She confided in me that she had been mortified as robots were paraded in front of her, counting or failing to count her as the elderly woman in the group. At the time, there were no women on the committee devising these challenges and very few women on the competing teams. She told me she didn't feel comfortable telling anyone else besides me about her experience. And to me, this is a sterling example of why more women and the social awareness and empathy that we can exemplify are needed in robotics. On the bright side, the younger competitors had a lot of young women compared to the older leagues. And when I related this story to another professor whom I'd identified as an ally and was deeply involved in the event, he became a lot more proactive in campaigning for more inclusion in general and became more aware of how these challenges could be offensive. Allies are really important because it can become exhausting to argue against people who dig their heels in defending ideas like creating a challenge to have robots identify women at a party scene, to escort them to sit next to people they identify as men. And yes, I understand that there are technical aspects of this challenge, but women shouldn't and do not need to act alone in making the world hospitable for us. So I have very selfish motivations for wanting more women in technical workplaces. The more of us there are, the better our needs will be met. And the workplace has many elements from office temperature to tool design that are designed around men's bodies. So this brings us to the ladies level that's been on the screen for a while. So I brought a tool for my lab that was described as a ladies level, and it seemed hilarious to me that a level would be gender specific. It cost a bit more than its non-gender specific, implicitly more masculine counterparts, and it was a bit flimsier and bubblegum pink, as you can see. Conveniently, though, it fits into more spaces without potentially scratching delicate surfaces than the other levels in my lab, and it's lighter in the toolbox, which is convenient in the field. A lot of tools marketed to women in bubblegum pink finishes are just like men's tools, but they cost more and they break more easily, and they call that the pink tax. I dream of a world where women's tools work just as well, are just as durable, and are equally affordable, but are labeled as women's based only on having been designed to be more ergonomic for women's bodies, just like my blue jeans. For example, I've got some really excellent crimp tools in my lab that are just a little too big for my hands. And we've got some wing nuts on our camera mounts that it takes a bit more force than I can readily supply to break torque when removing them. The more and longer women are included, the more the environment will change to support us, not at the expense of men, but so that it supports us and others whose needs have been inadequately represented thus far too. As I mentioned earlier in this talk, and really is exemplified in this festival, women tend to be more other-oriented, and when we are heard And when we are heard, we represent our own needs as minorities in the technical workforce. We're also more likely to be aware of the needs of other underrepresented groups to make the workplace a more supportive and empowering place for everyone. Technical careers like robotics are an opportunity to make a real impact on the world. These are toothsomely challenging creative fields with a growing influence on more and more aspects of more and more people's daily lives. Robots are no longer confined to the factory, but where they are in the factory, let's ensure their control mechanisms and operations are compatible with women's bodies as well as men's. When they're in the home, let's make robots that empower people to live the lives they want without enforcing harmful biases and behaviors towards people. Let's ensure our data sets are representative of a diversity of environments, faces, and voices. And let's show the young girls of today examples of capable, strong, brilliant women working with robots to inspire them to become the women roboticists of the future. This is our time to influence our cultural narrative about what a woman is and can be. Which brings me to the group Women in Robotics as a campaign calling for images of women working on robotics. If you do an image search for women building robots, you will find more female robots than roboticists, and we want to change this. Women in Robotics has a great list that they update every year, showcasing women roboticists announced on Ada Lovelace Day. Happy Ada Lovelace Day. And this year there are 50. Yes, you can't be what you can't see. I love this quote. So I intend to participate in this, and my company is gathering women volunteers to participate as well. So I wanted to close with an image of Rosie the Riveter doing the pose from Uncle Sam, "We Want You," but I couldn't find it, but I did find this and this. And with that, I will say thank you.